Welcome everyone to Sunday school again this morning. I trust everyone's had a good weekend so far. It's good to see Sister Reagan come and visit with us today. Would you mind opening our Sunday school class with prayer for us, please? And today we're going to be continuing our quarter study on miracles of Jesus. And I told y'all last week we're going to be looking at the miracle of the coin in the fish's mouth. To me, this is one of the most unique miracles that we study. But there's quite a few things that on first glance you don't recognize that are implied as part of this miracle. I told y'all last week at the end of the lesson, I just remember as a kid, I was fascinated by that. I spent many months trying to catch a fish with a coin in it. I was looking at every fish I caught. Every time I caught one, it's got to be in there somewhere. Never found some weird things in their mouths, but not coins. Occasionally a snake or two, but something like that. But anyway, the text for today is from Matthew chapter 17, verse 24. If you want to turn there, and we're studying them here in this quarter. There's actually 9 miracles revealing Jesus' power over nature, including this one. That's what this quarter is about. It's all about the power over the things of nature. And today's miracle is actually only recorded in the book of Matthew. Possibly, I don't know for sure, but remember, Matthew's the tax collector. So this may have meant something a little bit more to Matthew. To me, it kind of signifies that sometimes a miracle will be just for that one disciple, maybe not, although he's going to teach all of them something. So as we look at the text, we've got to be mindful that Jesus can use any method he chooses to minister to an individual, including catching a fish with a coin in its mouth to pay you taxes. So as we look at this account, we need to take note that Matthew records this text directly after the miracle of the father with the demon-possessed son. We'll probably be studying that miracle. I think we studied that in the last quarter. But the father with the demon-possessed son, remember the disciples couldn't cast the demon out. And so I think there's some significance in the fact of where this one falls in relation to that. And remember that he also, with that demon-possessed son, he had rebuked the disciples for their unbelief and then taught them a lesson about faith. Here's where it's in Matthew 17, verse 19, just prior to our text. It says, "Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, 'Why could not we cast him out?' And Jesus said unto them, 'Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove. And nothing shall be impossible unto you.'" And keep in mind, that's just 4 verses ahead of where the text here. So as we're going to see, Jesus used a most unexpected method to teach another spiritual principle and some biblical truths. So the miraculous point of this lesson is the fish story. But don't fail to recognize another important aspect as we study the 5th miracle of Jesus showing his power over nature. It's more than just the fish story. There's some lessons he has here. So if you're in Matthew 17, 24, here's the text for today's lesson. "And when they were come to Capernaum, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, 'Doth not your master pay tribute?' He saith, Yes. And when he was come into the house, Jesus prevented him, saying, What thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their children or of strangers? Peter said unto him, Of strangers. Jesus saith unto him, Then are the children free. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go thou to the sea, cast in a hook, and take up the fish that first cometh up. And when thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money. That take and give unto them for me and thee." So first point we want to look at is kind of what set up the miracle is the tax. It's tax time. It was a custom in Jesus' day when a male 20 years of age or older entered into the city of Capernaum, they were required to pay a temple tax. So when it says, and when they came into Capernaum, they're coming there, this wasn't something that like in some of the other miracles, the Pharisees or Sadducees were trying to trick Christ into doing something. This was just the custom of that time. When you came into the city, if you were 21 or older, you were expected to pay tribute, this tax, for the good of the temple. Again, this wasn't a civil tax like due to the Romans. We don't want to confuse those two issues. He does deal with taxes with the Romans and some other places in Scripture, but this is a tax that was set up for the services and expense of running the temple. The tax actually was first recorded in the book of Exodus, so this wasn't something that just all of a sudden was here. It was set up in Exodus as an atonement tax or a ransom for your soul. It's in Exodus chapter 30. I want to read about how this tax began, the premise of what it was supposed to be, before we continue looking at how it was when they walked into Capernaum that day. So this is what originally this tax was about. It's Exodus 30, verse 11. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, When thou takest the sum of the children of Israel after their number, then shall they give every man a ransom for his soul unto the Lord, when thou numberest them, that there be no plague among them when thou numberest them. This they shall give every one that passeth among them that are numbered, a half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary. A shekel is about 20 gerahs, and half a shekel shall be the offering of the Lord. Every one that passeth among them that are numbered from 20 years old and above shall give an offering unto the Lord. The rich shall not give more, the poor shall not give less than half a shekel, when they give an offering unto the Lord to make an atonement for your souls. And thou shalt take the atonement money of the children of Israel, and shall appoint it for the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, that it may be a memorial unto the children of Israel before the Lord, to make an atonement for your souls. So originally this tax was, of course, now in Jesus' day, they don't have the tabernacle like that, the portable one moving it around. There's actually a temple. So it kind of moved from being the tabernacle tax there to the temple tax, but nonetheless, that's the reasoning behind where this was set up in Capernaum. So in our setting, it seems that this was primarily used as a tax for the support and the upkeep of the temple. This is just me. Near as I could tell from reading a few commentaries, it would equate something similar to me to the idea of being like a tithe, to keep the church running. It was to pay the electric bill, pay the water bill, that kind of stuff. Keep up all the things here. So this tax or this thing was imposed on every male for the privilege of entering the temple, the house of God. You can already see where men have twisted it just a little bit from the original one. Originally, it was so that no plague would be among you. It was a ransom for your soul. They've kind of twisted it a little more for the privilege of coming into the house. You've got to pay this tribute or this tax. The gist of it's the same, but they're looking at it a little differently. This tax originally came from God. It was instituted by Moses, and it was possible that through the years it lost its original purpose. So it began to be a little misused, even to the point of maybe being overbearing. Think about taxes today. That's how they have gotten now. My tax guy over there in Bayou Vista, I love it, on the wall, hanging on the wall in a frame. He's got the first U.S. tax form ever, like from when it first started, 1901. And it's 1 page and 7 lines long. All right. He did my taxes. It's a book. It's about this thick. All right. And I don't even have a lot of stuff. I don't know what all these rich people, we were dodging loopholes all over the place. Theirs must be volumes on volumes. It gets to be overbearing. It gets to be misused. I mean, how many of y'all realize in our tax system, we're supposed to build roads and bridges. Our roads and bridges are terrible. Where all that money went? It went somewhere. Again, it is also possible in this setting of our text here that the money collected could have been used to support the overindulgent lifestyles of the priest. Think about this tax. In 1901, the tax income from the United States compared to what it would be today in money, the population's way bigger. So it's way more money. They had half a shekel a person. It doesn't say specifically what the tax was in this time frame, but half a shekel was next to nothing. That was a couple of grains of barley. I mean, it wasn't hardly anything. But now they're expecting this tax. So for whatever reason, we find those who were in charge of collecting the tax now confronting the disciple of Jesus in an attempt to get that tribute or the tax from Jesus and his disciples. Again, I can't really fault these guys. I don't think we should. They're doing their job. All right, that's what they're supposed to do. But imagine how foolish it has to look as they appeared here in an attempt to assess a tax upon Jesus so that he can come into his Father's house. It's his house. He said that. Who they give taxes to, their own children or the strangers. How foolish that looks, especially from Christ's perspective. This is my Father's house, and you want me to pay to come in here. They were so busy carrying out the purpose of God. Again, the temple has to be kept up. You got to have funds. But they were so focused on collecting this tax for the purpose of God that they missed the fulfillment of his purpose, which was being carried out right in front of them in the life of Jesus Christ. I would submit today that most churches are falling into this same kind of category. We're so busy being busy about Christ that we don't even acknowledge him. That's why he's outside the church knocking to get in and nobody will let him in, because we're too busy doing stuff for him to realize he's there. So again, for everyone that was familiar in their day with the origin of this tax, and even the day since I explained it to you here a little bit, the fact that Jesus was big enough to be willing to pay an atonement tax in an effort to not offend those who are collecting it, you got to appreciate that. I mean, he's saying, go down, find the fish, collect the coin. You know, we're going to pay the tax, but at the same time, realize who he is and what they're really asking. You got to acknowledge this here. They asked Peter this question in verse 24. Doth not your master pay tribute? Notice Peter was quick in his response. Yes, he does. He didn't hesitate right away. And yes, Jesus was a fulfillment of God's purpose and message that he preached. He's preaching that. The law is valid. Look, we lose sight of that. A lot of religions do too. A lot of people think grace replaced the law. It didn't replace it. It confirms it. So if the law is you're supposed to pay this tax, well, Christ he's going to pay that tax. That is part of fulfilling what he came to do. So he's going to be fair towards all men, and everything's going to be done decently and in order. So he that came to fulfill the law had to be an example of obeying the law. Again, our world today, especially all these, I'm a New Testament believer, they want to discard the law. You can't discard it. All right, you can't keep it either, so that's why you need grace. Grace is how you're saved. You can't keep it, but grace allows you to come into the presence of the Father through what Christ did. But the law is still there. Aside from Christ, guess what? You broke the law, you're going to hell. You're not going to make it to heaven like that. So clearly those who abuse the law are guilty of misunderstanding the law. It's to point us to the fact that we're not going the right direction. We can't get going the right direction on our own. We've got to have some assistance. That comes through Christ, who is everything, not just assistance. He's the answer. He is the only way to do it. But that meets the criteria of the law. It doesn't do away with it. So a rebel spirit is never going to understand God. I mean, look at him in this story. He is God's son. It's his temple. But he's still going to pay the tax because that's what the law says. He's going to fulfill that. A lot of times you have to do stuff because it's the right thing to do. Maybe you don't want to, and sometimes you don't have to, but it's still the right thing to do. Look, that's what's missing in our society by a long shot. I had kids at school all the time. Well, I'm not doing that because I don't have to. Yeah, but it sure would be nice if you did, and it would be correct if you did. Yeah, all right, you don't have to, but what about some respect for your teachers? What about some respect for your parents? What about some respect for law enforcement? You don't have to, but you need to. A rebel spirit, again, never sees God's purpose in anything and is never going to understand how good God is and how good God intends. They're looking at just me. Christ here is definitely showing us, I don't have to, but I don't want to be offending you because you think that. Similar to when Paul was talking about eating meat to idols. He said, they dead. They can't do anything. But if your brother's going to be offended because you ate meat sacrificed to an idol, then don't do it. All right? Again, you can follow what it says. Second thing we want to see is once the tax thing was made present, they announced, we need, are you going to pay this or not? Yeah, he is. Is that Jesus prevented him from his immediate intent. Talking about Peter. Peter's immediate intent was, yes, he does. Let me go get some money. All right? He's jumping up to do it. Jesus knows all things, and he's aware of everything that had taken place, not just between Peter and these guys, but also between Moses and the people in the tabernacle in Exodus, all the way up to today, and the priests and how they were interacting. He knows all that. So he stopped Peter before Peter paid the amount was owed. This interesting little thing here that we got to realize, he's still going to pay it, but he's going to make sure Peter understands what he's doing before he does it. Think about that. God doesn't call us just to blindly do whatever. You need to know what you're doing. You need to count the cost ahead of time. So Peter needed to learn that there was a greater authority at work than those that were collecting the tax money. Yes, they had some authority. Yes, he's going to pay the tax. Yes, it is the right thing to do. But look at what you're doing. They're not the ultimate authority. He's not paying the tax because he owes it to these people. That's not the point. Jesus prevented him from doing that. He stopped him from going any further. So it's here we find that Jesus is asking another question in order to teach a principle. It's in verse 25. What thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their children or of the strangers? He has three quick questions right in a row. With these questions, Jesus is helping Peter to see this situation, what's happening, from an eternal perspective instead of just the earthly. The earthly perspective is, these are the tax collectors, they in charge, I got to go get some money. All right, he's helping him see the eternal perspective. Secondly, he's also given Peter the opportunity to compare the motives behind not just this tax, but all the other taxes of the day. I mean, again, think about our taxes today. You pay income tax, then you go buy groceries and pay tax on the groceries that you're spending the money that you've already been taxed on to pay tax. You go to the gas station, you're paying tax again on gasoline on the money you've already paid. When you die, you leave all your money to your kids that you've already paid taxes on, and guess what? They're going to tax that again too. There's more than one. What's the motive behind everything going on? Even in his day, there were more than just this temple tax. Third thing that these questions addressed is who is required to pay the tax. He's bringing that to his attention. So he deals with all of the possible avenues for impure motives to enter in to that society at that time. See it from an eternal perspective, look at the motive of this tax compared to everything else, and then addresses who's supposed to pay it. You can see where the impurity of the system can enter in and alter any three of those things and totally change the intent of what it was. That's what I said earlier at the beginning. Originally, this is an atonement tax. Now they're making it a tax to be able to come into the presence of God. You do know you can come into the presence of God through Jesus Christ, and it's absolutely free. There's no tax anywhere. He paid all that price already. So we can clearly see God has the final word in every circumstance. There are many times when Jesus stops us from doing what we feel is the right thing. Lately, especially maybe the last 5 or 10 years, I don't know, I've been kind of dealing with that idea of how we act upon our feelings. Our feelings are really irrelevant in terms of eternity. What actually matters is what does the book say. You can feel whatever you want about the book, but that doesn't change what the book says. It can change what we think it says. We need help with God to keep us straight. Sometimes we're doing the right thing, we think, because of how we feel, and God wants to bring to our attention, it's okay to still do that, but your motivation shouldn't be, you're missing the point in your motivation. We can do the right thing with the wrong motivation, and to me, that's the wrong thing. It's got to be what Christ has called us to do, not what we feel like Christ. Anybody besides me ever thought you were doing something from the Lord and it fell flat on your face and then you're mad at God? I can't be the only one that that's ever happened to. And then God's like, wait a minute, look, that's not what I told you to do. Yeah, well, I was doing it that way because it was easier. Well, that's easier is not better. All right, do what he told you to do. So as humans, we're quick to follow and become victims of man-made authority. Don't believe that? Look back to the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. Pretty much everybody did exactly what they say, and then now we're finding out half of what they said didn't work anyway. But we're victims of man-made authority. It's possible that Peter was on his way to his house to get the money to pay the tribute. Paying tribute money may have been a common practice of that day. Established already. It was understood by everybody that knew there. When you came into Capernaum and you were 20 years older, you paid the temple tax. Everybody knew that. But at this time, when Christ is here with him, paying that tax is not the most pressing issue. So in their ministry, Jesus' disciples were going to need to be firmly convinced of who they were living for. They would have to believe in their hearts that their God was in complete control of everything, no matter what the system said, no matter what the government said, no matter what your mom and dad says. Jesus is still in control of the situation. Jesus didn't come to condemn the law. He came to fulfill the law. So he had the authority to interpret the law. Look, there's a lot of people, they read this Bible, and they write papers and volumes of books about what it is. I've read some of those books, and that ain't nothing that it says in this Bible, all right? So if you're not careful and you're not following Christ, and you read some of this, you're going to be interpreting things wrong. It wasn't the temple tax that was the problem. He's going to pay it, because that's the law. But it was the interpretation and enforcement by the religious of that day that was the problem. They're so caught up in, I got to collect this money, that they're not worried about doing what God called them to do. By carrying out the law properly, Christ not only would be fulfilling it, but he gives it explanation. He gives it true meaning. What does it mean? You know, we read the laws as do's and don'ts instead of the laws are helps. They keep you on the right track. So the disciples needed to understand that Jesus always has the final say. So no matter what man would say or attempt to do, the disciples were to look directly to Christ in order to keep themselves from being misled or their ministry from being controlled by man. That temple tax was an attempt for the religious to control how people interacted with God. You can't come in God's presence without this tax. Well, that's a lie. There's nothing wrong with paying the tax to help keep the upkeep of the church. You're getting the motivation behind it. Why are we paying that? Well, why are you paying your tithes? Because Scripture said you should, and it's the thing to do. Then, in my mind, tithes shouldn't be a problem at all. But religion skews that around a little bit. Motives enter in that shouldn't be there. Again, regardless of who may oppose God's people, whoever, God's people will always be looked upon by those in religious authorities as being strangers. Christ himself is being forced. No, he's not forced because he didn't have to, but they're implying that you have to pay a tax because you're a stranger. Well, he can't be a stranger to his own house. That's crazy. Again, those who belong to God will always be strangers to those who are pretending to belong to God. If you want to fit in the religious world, you got a better chance of fitting in with the heathen world. The religious world hates God. They hate God more than the people in the bar room. Most people in the bar room, they don't even think about God. They just kind of ignore him and going, I'm not saying that's a good thing, brother. I'm not saying that. But they're not actively seeking to destroy him. Who were the people that wanted to crucify Christ? The common people? The Romans didn't even want to kill him. Pilate's like, there ain't nothing wrong with this guy. What's y'all's problem? It's the religious people that wanted to kill him. They're the ones who are isolating him. That'll bring us to the third point. He told him about who pays the tax, the children or the strangers. He's kind of established by not telling him, hold on, wait a minute. They're going to treat us like strangers, but we are children. It's amazing that those who oversaw collecting the tribute money for the temple of God, those whose faces were regularly seen in the building that they considered to contain the presence of God, failed to recognize the actual presence of God when he was right there with them. He's the one that they're in the temple proclaiming, and they don't even see him. What hypocrisy is displayed by those who looked upon Jesus as being a stranger in his own Father's house. In reality, if they'd have been on par with what they would have wanted Christ to come into the temple. They'd have set him in the best seat in the whole house. Forget paying a tax. He's God's son. Again, children or strangers. That's the two answers that Jesus called upon Peter to answer. Which one? So in reality, this gives us a clear picture of the two categories that all humanity falls into. Everybody. Every person who is alive or has ever been alive is either going to be considered by Christ as a child of God or a stranger. You're either going to hear, come on with me into the glories of God forever, or depart from me, I never even knew you. You're either a stranger or you're a son, one of the two. There's no middle ground. And each of us makes a choice which is ultimately visible to everybody in your everyday actions. Our actions are showing clearly which one we belong to. That'll bring us to a fourth point. And he said, the children are strangers. Peter answered, of course, the children, they're not taxed. The strangers are the ones they take tribute from. He gave the correct answer. Kings of the earth take tribute from those who are not part of their own household. What good would it do to tax your own family? That kind of behavior would be unproductive and highly unprofitable. So when it comes to the kingdom of God, the same principles hold true. The child of God is free. Free from the burden of sin, free from guilt, free from the shame of the past, free to boldly come into the throne of grace, free to enter the presence of the Anointed One, free to see the Holy One of Israel. There's no temple tax in that sense anymore. Do I think there should be some kind of method for you to help pay for the expenses of keeping the temple up? Yes, there is. But that's not an expense to come into God's presence. They've misused that. Jesus has already paid the tax, the debt, for everybody who follows him. The price has been paid, so we can enter into his presence burden-free. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't help upkeep the church. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, that should not be a requirement to be able to come into the presence of the Lord. Look, mankind's system, they'll confuse you. They'll have you doing all kind of stuff. I'm going to tell you now, I got some friends, they serve the church because they have to. That's what the rules are. They've convinced them that if you don't come do this, you can't go to heaven. That's a lie. But I submit that if you are going to heaven, you will do those things. Just like Christ, he is God's son. He's going to follow the law. I'm going to pay the temple tax because of who he is. The same for us. It's the motivation behind it that he's addressing. Not just them and not just the religious, but even the disciples themselves. Look what you're doing, Peter. You're going to pay that. Why? That's the question. He's bringing to his attention, why are you doing the things you're doing? If we're doing things because we think it's the right thing to do, you're probably doing something wrong in the middle there. You need to do things because God told you that's what you're supposed to do. That'll bring us to the fifth point, lest we should offend them. again, Christ's words are offensive to many people, but he never intended to be directly offensive. Offense comes to those who fail to comprehend the love and the grace and the mercy of God. Those who are offended are the ones who are guilty of what he's talking about. Jesus' action suggests that he's aware the tribute needed to be paid. So rather than offend them, he's going to give them what they require. So if we have been receiving spiritually, we should do our part to keep the church functioning. Matthew Henry makes a note of a couple of things right here. I'm going to quote him directly because he says it better than I could do anyway. Here's what he says about this passage right here. First, church duties legally imposed are to be paid, notwithstanding church corruptions. We must take care not to use our liberty as a cloak of covetousness or maliciousness. If Christ pays the tribute, then who can pretend an exemption? 1 Peter 2:15. For so it is the will of God that with well-doing ye may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as the servants of God. Again, Christ is showing if he's going to pay it, then there's nobody else can say they shouldn't support the church. That third thing, this is Matthew Henry, direct quote again. Christian prudence and humility teach us in many cases to recede from our right rather than give offense by insisting upon it. We must never decline our duty for fear of giving offense. Christ's preaching and miracles offended them, yet he went on with him, better offend men than God. Matthew 15:12. Then came his disciples and said unto him, Knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended after they heard this saying? But he answered and said, Every plant which my heavenly Father hath not planted shall be rooted up. Look again at Matthew Henry. We must sometimes deny ourselves in that which is our secular interest rather than give offense as Paul. 1 Corinthians 8. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. In Romans 14, verse 13, it says, Let us not therefore judge one another any more, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way. So in our text here, we should be careful to note how much concern Jesus has for every individual involved. Not just in this miracle, but every miracle. We've said that quite a few times. It's for the person individually, even healings, even Peter here, but it also is for everybody. He's concerned not just about the disciples, not just the guys that came collecting the money, but even the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the religious who sent these guys to collect the money. He's concerned with all of it. He takes the time and effort to reach out to everybody. First, by instructing Peter, then by extending grace and mercy to those who were collecting the money. Look, you think about it. He realizes if they come back without the money, they're going to get fussed at by the boss because they didn't do it. He doesn't want to cause them trouble, but at the same time, he didn't just let it happen. He addressed it. Our world today, we've got the idea of you come to church as a sinner and you can just stay one, don't worry about it, just accept God and you'll be okay. You still got to address it. Christ ate with the sinners. He dined with the publicans. I've got some friends of mine throw that out there all the time. That don't mean you should go to the bar room, but if God tells you to go to the bar room with the intent of addressing what's going on in the bar room, not with the intent of just sitting there chatting with your buddies. All right, he didn't go eat with the publicans because just to have a friendly afternoon chat. He went to address what they're doing. Same thing here. We've seen this in a lot of miracles. Some of the most difficult instructions are preceded with the most miraculous events. So if we're going through extremely hard times, get ready for some great victories. So it would be this case. Jesus was about to give his disciple a set of instructions that would make even the most seasoned fisherman stop and wonder. I guess a seasoned fisherman, not me, when I was a kid, didn't make me wonder at all. It made me want to go catch the money. But most people, when they heard, if that was the instructions Christ gave you, how many of y'all are like, really? Or how many of you are going to get up and go fishing? It's amazing that things that are difficult to understand in the instruction come at the most crucial time. I don't think that's an accident either. What a better test of your faith than to give you some obscure instructions which you're not even sure what they mean, but you just know what they are. You know what it says. You're not sure how that's going to work out. Well, what a better trial of your faith than for you to jump out and do it. If he made it simple where you knew it was going to work, it wouldn't take too much faith to do that, right? The challenge is your faith, not the instructions, not even the difficulty of them. Really, if Christ says go do it, nothing's difficult about that at all. Take him literally for what he said and start doing that. Don't worry about what it looks like. Most men would not attempt to carry out these kind of instructions that didn't make any sense. But in the spiritual realm, it makes more sense than the knowledge all the world could offer. All the scholars of the whole world combined could not come up with a more convenient appropriation of funds to pay this tribute. They couldn't have came up with a better way to do it than that. Catch a fish, open his mouth, get your money, go pay the taxes. Simple there. That'll bring us to the last point we'll look at is the unexpected method of payment. I want to follow through in our text the instructions he was given. Go thou to the sea. Again, Peter's a fisherman. Peter would have a fish story to tell everybody. Only the faithful probably going to believe him, though. Surely at the words of Jesus, Peter thought he was going to have to labor to get money to pay this tribute. However, one fish, one coin, done. He said, and cast a hook. That's an action that Peter was familiar with. But also notice in this miracle, it didn't say cast a net, it said cast a hook. You don't need a net. You're not going to need to catch a bunch. You're only going to need to catch one, and you're going to catch the one you need right there. Cast out and catch it. You're done. One is enough. He also told him, take up the fish that cometh up first. There would not be any need to go through the process of catching and inspecting fish and go. That's me. I'm going through fish. I got tired of looking in fish's mouths when I was little. I never did find that coin, but because God didn't instruct me to do that. If he'd have told me to go find one, I no doubt I'd have caught the first one, would have had a coin just like you said. That there's a story there, I think, on our own too. Trying to duplicate what happened for somebody else without hearing from the Lord first is a waste of your time. As silly as that is, praying for somebody that God didn't tell you to pray for is about as much a waste of time as trying to catch a fish with a coin in its mouth if he didn't tell you to do it. Then he told him, and when thou hast opened his mouth. When he opened his mouth, again, most people are trying to unhook the fish, but today he's going to find the fish. He received confirmation that the Lord was in control of all of nature. Think about where Peter's been just prior to this. He saw his mother-in-law healed. He saw Jesus feed 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He saw him feed 4,000 men with 7 loaves and a few fish. He walked on water. He saw Jesus walked on water. He saw Jesus rebuke and calm the storm. Today's a little bit different, though, because it's just Peter. Not everybody, not a collective bunch, just him. There was only going to be one fish in the whole sea, and Peter was not just going to have to find it, but had to catch it. Nothing is mentioned about Jesus going to the seashore with him. Peter would be all alone, but he did. Then he said, thou shalt find a piece of money. Again, the chances of catching a fish with money in their mouth is nearly impossible. But catch one with enough money to pay taxes for Peter and for Jesus? Today it was there. What will people think when he goes and gives the money to him and says, hey, I got this out of a fish mouth when I was fishing this morning? At times, obedience to our Lord may seem like foolishness to the world, but remember, we're strangers passing through. He supplies our needs as we obey his instructions. Look, that's one that the religious has twisted around too. God supplies all your needs, period. That's a lie. God supplies all your needs as you follow his instructions. If you're not following his instructions, I wouldn't be expecting to get nothing. He supplies your needs as you follow his instructions. And what are his instructions? To be a light to the kingdom of his kingdom in this world. All of it's about him. If it's not about him, then we're missing the point altogether. It's doubtful that Peter told anybody these instructions, by the way, in my mind. I can't imagine. He might have, but I don't think so. He probably just went and got the coin and did what he was told. Last thing he said was, that take and give to them for me and thee. So the coin was enough for Christ and Peter. Nothing less, nothing more. It was exactly what they needed. Give of that which you've received. Jesus is going to meet the need. Peter wouldn't be able to give the glory or credit to anybody but the Lord. He didn't go out and work for the money. He just found it in the fish's mouth. So in conclusion, again, Matthew doesn't say everything that took place after the instructions. It's fair to say that Peter did what he was said. So obedience to every command is necessary if we're going to become vessels of faith. All we need to focus on is the fact that Jesus gave the instructions and then believe it will come to pass as he said it would. It made no difference at all if the ones around laughed. He went fishing for the money because he was going to follow the instructions. Many may doubt and question, oh, that's impossible. That can never happen. That's just the devil trying to get you to not do it. He'll talk you out of it. We need to have a heart full of childlike faith and believe for the miraculous. It is for sure that God not only created every kind of fish, but he also especially prepared a fish for Peter. If you got a problem with that, talk to Jonah. It happened more than once. Next week, we're going to be looking at the cursing of the fig tree in Matthew 21:17. So thank you all today and look forward to seeing you next week.